Here's what happened. Since my 2018 burnout, I've been introduced to a lot of new skills. Some of these skills have stuck with me. They become habits. And then others, I know that I could improve them for becoming habits. And then there are other ones that just didn't serve me and I tossed them out. But the ones that have become a habit, like mo time, getting my movement in, I've noticed how that can help me to move towards who do I want to become and the vision I have for my life. And then there are these certain other habits that I'm like, oh, I can improve that and get that a little bit better to become really solid habit. One that comes up is my reflection at the end of the day, making sure I have more time for that and understanding what serves me and what doesn't serve me. Because I know how that can speed up so much faster for me to move towards my vision of what I have for my life and who I want to become. So I am sure there are a few different skills that are coming up for you right now where you're like, man, this would be great to become a habit. And I want to get into what to avoid when you're building these habits from new skills without feeling burnout. This is Make Burnout Extinct. I'm Robert David Weeks. So I'm going to get into that problem. I'll get into the connection with burnout, and then I'll share with you some examples of the habits currently that I have, a few of them, and the lessons that I've learned within those that I know are going to be so helpful for you and resonate for these lessons that you can implement as you're starting to build these better habits for ultimately that life that you're creating for yourself. I know it can feel at times like you're like looking out at the far distance. It's almost like you're looking up at space for where that vision is and that life you have for yourself. But it does start with like one day at a time, one action at a time. And I really want to make sure that you realize that you have the capabilities to move towards who you want to become and the vision you have for your life. This is your reminder. I know we get hit with these hard days that can come up and the struggle, and you're like, shit, is this actually possible? Well, guess what? If you stop, it's not possible. So it's in that moment where you can pause, honor the feelings that come up, but you don't got to get stuck in that. You can move forward towards who it is you want to become and the vision you have for your life. So to get into the problem, what's coming up for these potentially for you with building these new habits is that you are in that stop and start phase where it can feel like this tug of war where all of a sudden you have a few days in a row, it goes really well. And then you might have it where it's on the opposite end, where a few weeks go by and you totally forget about doing the skill. And then all of a sudden it's like 3 months later and you're like, shit, now that skill, I got to get back into that. And it's that like aha moment of like, I got to get back on the horse or get back on track to do this. So that could be one that you're struggling with right now. The other one could be the just frustration, like the anger of the progress, feeling like that. It's like that internal tantrum that's happening where you just fill up with tension. And then all of a sudden it becomes that pity party that can either last a few hours, a few minutes, could last a few potentially years. So I want to minimize that for you too, where you're not stuck in that. You honor those feelings. We want, we want to honor feelings that come up. You don't want to just suppress that, but you also don't want to get stuck and not be able to move forward. So that could be another one where you get so frustrated with the progress, you feel like something's missing or something's wrong, and then you just give up on the whole thing. You just like toss it, throw in the towel and say, I'm done. So that's another one. Or you could be super exhausted. I mean, you got a lot of other responsibilities going on. You want to take care of everyone else and you want to make sure everyone else is good. But with that, we've got to make sure that you don't forget about you. And I really love how Mel Robbins puts this for self-love, which is actions to yourself. That's how we can give ourselves self-love. It's also another way to build confidence within ourselves, going back to what I've shared for my definition, which is the trust that you can handle whatever comes your way. So by focusing in on these habits or these skills and building them into habits, that is a way that we get to create this self-love, this act of self-love. And it's powerful. It's beautiful in that way. And then who you become as a result of it is so fucking awesome. And it's something I want you to be able to experience for yourself. So let's get into then the skills. What could be some skills that you are focusing on? You might have a few that come up, but I'm going to just share some potential for you of like, oh yeah, that's the one I want to work on. So one could be getting better at making presentations. When it comes to your career, I learned this through my mentor and someone that I admire in the space, Eric Edmeades, where being able to focus in on the skill of public speaking can absolutely transform your career. And making presentations is one of those ways to hone in on that skill. So that could be one that you want to work on, is getting better at making those presentations. Another one is also in connection with public speaking is recording videos for social media. So that could be another one if you are someone that is putting out content or information, learnings through social media. That could be one. Another one could be creating daily movement, wanting to focus in on your fitness. And that could be an example. Another one could be cooking, like wanting to work on that skill of cooking. I know for me, like I'm raising my hand for that one, to be able to understand how powerful it is to nourish our body with food that is going to energize us. That is something that I have explored more and more in my own life, of knowing what foods energize me, which ones drain me, and getting conscious about that. Because then what that does is being able, it's like filling up the tank of a car with the wrong gas. That is going to cause issues down the line for the engine. And similar for how you can think about it with your body. Being able to put in the right fuel source for you is going to then help propel you to move faster towards who you want to become and the vision you have for your life. So that could be another one that you're wanting to work on for a skill. All of these are skills. All of these actions are skills. I stand by that. So how it connects to burnout? What can come up with any new skill is that there is an extra level of stress that comes up because you're trying out a new thing. It's like that awkward phase, trying to figure it out. It reminds me of my middle school dances. Like you're just awkward. You're just like, I don't know what to do here. Like, what do I do? And then that can also lead to some anxiety. That then it's the anxiety bubble that starts coming up, where you're uncertain about the future because you are making changes in your day-to-day life. So with your daily actions, there is that level of uncertainty that creates that anxiety of what the future is going to look like for the potential paths. But if we get stuck in that and not continue to make progress towards turning these skills into habits, that can cause the anxiety bubble to build up and actually get stuck within us. So then that leads into the first red flag that I've talked about with burnout, which is chronic exhaustion. Now, what can also come up is the second red flag of burnout, which is negativity. Negativity in your work that then leads into your personal life and then your outlook on the world. That negativity could come up when you're messing up with the new skill. And I want to remind you, it's natural to mess up a few times at the beginning, if not more. Thinking back to like getting better at making presentations, you're gonna stumble over your words. You're gonna forget information on the slide. You are going to mix up the words of how you wanted to communicate a certain idea. Like that happens. I think back to when I first wanted to focus in on the skill. I was coming from a place of someone that was so terrified and scared. I got into like my body literally was shaking of even wanting to like even trying to ask a question in front of a group of people. And so going from that to where I am now, it took time and it took a lot of practice and a lot of reps within that. But at the same time, who I became along the way, I am so proud to look back on that journey for myself. And it continued to reinforce the foundation of confidence I have within myself. So that negativity, it could be bubbling up for you. And then the other one is terrible performance, which is that third red flag, terrible performance in your job or your career or your business. Now, that also comes with new skills. Like you're going to have that messaging come through of like, oh, this is terrible performance. But it's just remember, you're starting off and you're starting to hone in on the skill and you're working on it becoming a habit. So all of these different connection points to burnout are the red flags to watch out for. It's to realize, are you consistently feeling the negativity? Are you consistently feeling that stress bubble up constantly and you're not having any action that you're taking to make sure it's like that roller coaster ride? You're making sure if it's coming up with the stress bubble and rising up, is it coming back down? So you want to make sure that you're creating this even flow and overall balance when it comes to navigating this, so you're not fueling burnout. And how we do that is what I'm going to get into for the insights to help you out so that you can catch yourself so you do not fuel burnout when you're building habits from these new skills. So I feel like I got to tell you then, I'll get into my own habits here. So the one that I want to highlight first to kick it off is my daily movement. That is something that has taken a few years now to get consistent with it. I go back to 2021. That was my big aha moment where I remembered I went to my brother's house, and this was when I was living back at my parents' place. And I went to his indoor gym, or not his indoor gym, his garage gym. and there was a pull-up bar there. So I went, grabbed on the pull-up bar. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do like a couple pull-ups. And as I was lifting, I was like struggling. I was just like, ugh, like trying to get my head over the bar. And it was like this struggle. My whole body was shaking. And then I like went back down and I'm like, shit, I cannot get back up. I cannot do a second one. And I felt so defeated in that moment. And I'm just like, man, looking back, I'm like, I have not gotten a lot of movement in. I've been cooped up. You know, it was the pandemic at that point, cooped up, hadn't really gotten a lot of movement in my day. And that for me was then the moment where I had to go on my phone, flip up the video, the camera, and record like a journal to myself of saying, enough's enough. Like I can't even do one pull up. I got to make a change here and focus on my fitness. And that then started this journey that I've been on since, of really consciously bringing my awareness to how to improve, how to make sure I'm getting my daily movement in. Now, one insight that I want to share with you based off of this is to keep the commitment small. What I mean by that is you just like, for example, with the daily movement, I just told myself, look, get 5 minutes of daily movement in, going outside for a walk, just 5 minutes to start. And then what happens is I get to celebrate that I did that for my baseline. And then over time, I wanted to do more. So it doesn't mean that you just stop for the day and be like, I'm done. If you have the feeling and the urge to want to do more movement, you can go for it. But what you've signaled to your body is that you get to celebrate that this action of daily movement is done for the day with just 5 minutes. Because what can happen, and I've been there, is all of a sudden when you haven't done a lot of daily movement at all, or if any, you're like, all right, I'm going to put out the big goal of doing like an hour intensive workout, like a HIIT training workout for an hour, which is already intense in itself. But then all of a sudden going from 0 to 100 is setting you up to not only fuel you burnout, but also to then give up on this skill entirely and stop building it as a habit. Because when you go to that extreme, yeah, maybe you'll get it done that first day and you'll feel like super awesome, like Hercules. But then are you going to be able to keep that up with all that's happening in your life, with obligations, again, at work, if that's responsibilities you have with family or friends or your partner? All of that then has to come into it. And you have to somehow fit this hour workout in. Now, what usually then happens, and you've experienced it if you've been in that tug of war, is let's say you get 4 days in a row, all of a sudden the 5th day you miss it. And then maybe you get back on track on the 6th day, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and then you fall off again on the 11th, and then the 12th, and the 13th. And then all of a sudden it becomes 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, and then before you know it, 3 months go by and you're like, oh yeah, shit, I remember I was trying to get like an hour workout in. And then you're like, all right, let me get back into it. And you get back into it. It's 3 months later. And it's just that constant feeling of getting stuck, of not making intense amount of progress. So what I want to remind you of is that, yes, it could feel good in the moment to do like put out a big goal and make that happen. But if you can actually start small for just saying, I'm gonna get it out for 5 minutes, then from there, what it allows for you to do is everything else is extra on top to celebrate with. So let's say you get the 5 minutes of movement in and they're like, yeah, actually, I do want to do another 60-minute workout, HIIT workout training. You get that done. Hells yeah. But what you got to remember is, okay, my baseline is 5 minutes. So let's say tomorrow, with stuff that comes up at work, or my friend called me and they really need my help to help them to move, that if that comes up and then all of a sudden the day goes by and you're like, shit, I can't figure out an hour long workout. What you can remember is, oh yeah, wait, my baseline is 5 minutes. Let me get 5 minutes in now. And then what could happen is 3 days later, you can then do the hour workout. So keeping those commitments small is going to help you to stick with this. And it takes reps over a period of time in order for it to become a habit. So by remembering that, and of just staying in the game is how you can think about it, of habit building, it's going to get easier and easier for this then to turn into a habit. So that's the first one I want to share with you. Another one that comes up is going back to the recording videos for social media. So the ones I shared are ones I went through at the beginning. So the one that comes up for me for story is I was visiting my mom and dad, and then I was doing a video on social media, and this was at a point where I was still struggling with letting them see me as someone that's sharing insights and information in social media. So I struggle with taking or with doing the takes. So I remember like I grabbed the phone and I'm like recording, but then I'm worried, oh my gosh, are my parents listening in? Or are they gonna like I remember my dad, he'd walk out in the front where I would be recording in the room, and there's like windows out front. And so he'd walk by and I'm like, oh shit, like he's seeing me, even though like the windows are closed and he's doing his own thing. But what would happen is I remember there was this one video where I really struggled on it. Like it took me over 20 takes to get it done. I was like recording it and then I'd stumble over the word. And this was like a minute long video. And I remember I'd stumble over my words, mess up the idea of how I wanted to share it, be like, oh, I didn't like that. And I'd go through it over these 20 takes. And what happened was that I was pushing and pushing and pushing. And it was causing me to take longer and longer and longer to do the video, because I kept just being like, all right, I can do it next time. And then I was getting into the self-talk of like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, come on, you got this, you can do this. But then also I was beating myself up internally of saying like, oh, you can't believe you can't get it done in like at least the first 3 takes. It's now getting to point of 15 or 20. And what can happen is that if you try to push, this is a moment for the next insight, is to, instead of trying to push, pause the push. If you are noticing yourself back to back to back to back, it not working for this skill, something like recording a video for social media, pause the push, because all that is doing is fueling your negative self-talk of beating yourself up internally, that then causes you to feel that negativity, which is that second red flag. And if you're having no way to release that, you're just constantly messing up, it's just going to build even more for that bubble. And then all of a sudden, what's going to happen is then you're going to hit that chronic exhaustion too. Like that can come over time if you're doing this over over a few days, if not more, a few weeks. So it's remembering that when that happens for the takes, instead of just pushing through, because yeah, you could get it done after over 20 takes, but how I felt after over 20 takes was exhausted. I felt so exhausted, so tired. I felt self-defeating. And then it was starting to create the spiral of me headed towards burnout, because then the next day I wasn't as motivated to want to do another recording of the video. So instead, pause the push. What you can do is change your environment. So if you're indoors, get outside. If you're sitting down, get up, because what will happen is you're able, with you feeling that negativity, instead of it getting stuck, create the movement to get it unstuck. Let yourself let it out for the movement. That could be getting a few push-ups in, going for that walk, or you could also do something which I learned from my somatic teacher, Annabelle, and that is to scream. Just let out like this roar of a lion's roar of like, roar. I won't do it intense for you listening, but like literally screaming lets out the tension of the body, and it's a moment to then reset. And especially with a new environment, it's also then a new opportunity to reset. So that is something to remember, is pause the push when you are doing it back to back to back to back and it's not working. So then the next one I want to share with you is to put the rep in before bed. What happens is there's this thing called Parkinson's law. Might be familiar with it, where if you give yourself a certain amount of time, let's say like 2 hours, you're going to take the full 2 hours to get either the work task done or a task around the house done, or you're going to put off cleaning the kitchen until like the last 5 minutes. I know this from personal experience. I am one of those where I'd raise my hand. I'm like, yep, I get it. I do that. So if you can remember to put the rep in before bed, you're going to make sure you're not going to put this off till tomorrow to work on this skill. If that is creating the daily movement, recording the video, making the presentation, or whatever other skill you're working on, you're not going to be like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. You're going to be remembering, I got to put the rep in before bed. And to make it even easier for you, you could say, I got to put the rep in before lunch or before the end of the workday. And what that does is it opens up more flexibility in your time, because you have your day-to-day, things going on in life with work and with personal life. I would struggle if I were to say, oh, 8:00, I'm going to get my workout in, because if I'm trying to make a big impact on the world and I got a lot going on, it sometimes doesn't line up for that 8 a.m. for other opportunities. And if by opening it up and having flexible time, then I'm able to fit it in at some point in the day. And that then keeps me going in making sure I'm building it as a habit. So that's another way to remember this is put the rep in before bed for an insight. Some other points I want to share with you that can come up that are part of the journey for building habits is that it's going to be messy at first. So just remembering it will be messy, and to also pause the perfection, because perfection doesn't exist. So this is another moment to remind you to pause it. Like, don't get sucked into that of like, oh, I gotta have the perfect conditions to be able to get outside or to get the workout in, or I gotta have the perfect conditions to do the video recording. Like, just doing the damn thing and put the rep in is going to remind your body that this is something you want more of. And celebrating, going back to a play that you can add that for the Burnout Proof Playbook, celebrating after the effort is going to remind your body even more that you want this moving forward. So it's going to be messy. Another thing that can come up is that you're going to skip potentially a few days in a row. Like, there's a certain period where you start off strong, and then there's going to be a moment where you're going to skip a day. That could be 20 days into it. It could be 5 days into it, but there's going to be a moment where we're going to skip. It's remembering that can come up. It's normal. It's resistance from the body of trying to test you of, is this something you want to build into a new habit for the skill? It's going to test you with wanting to go back to how things were. That is to just give yourself grace in that moment. Honor it. Give yourself compassion. You can give yourself, I know it may sound weird, but like literally give yourself a hug. Like, that helps out. I know it was weird for me at first, like, oh, I can hug myself. Like, that's okay. So it's remembering that you can do that for yourself, of just giving yourself grace to honor the disappointment that's going to come up, honor the potential guilt of like, I could have gotten it done, or the shame that could come up of like, man, I could have really gotten that done yesterday. Honor it and remember tomorrow's a new day to reset. And from there, you get back on track and you do it, because you got to remember you're putting in the reps to make it a habit. It takes a certain amount of reps to turn that into a habit. And that is going to be so helpful for you to stick with this thing and not give up. Some other things that you got to remember is that there's going to be an awkward phase. Going back to that middle school dance that I talked about, there will be the awkward phase where you're like trying to figure out how this skill works for you. I think about that with communication. I went through this phase of, okay, I feel comfortable with speaking to groups, and then I wanted to really improve my vocal tones and improve the word, how I was articulating, and really get more comfortable in just being me, understanding what that is. And so it actually became an awkward phase where at first I thought I was able to just do this and this was okay, but then I wanted to get better at it for the habit. And so that created an awkward phase of having to learn my voice more, understanding the words, and really being able to focus in on what I'm articulating and being super present. So remembering that there's that awkward phase with any new skill that you are developing and turning into a habit can help you to remember to, again, give yourself grace and pause the perfection. And most importantly, finish the rep. So making sure that you finish that video, or you finish the practice for the presentation, or you finish that daily movement, or you finish that cooking for the day. That meal you wanted to try out, you at least did it, even if it doesn't come out how exactly you wanted it. And then goes back to celebrating the effort. Always like that play, for one play to hold on to as a foundational play, it's one that I have for me, is celebrating the effort. You don't have to celebrate the outcome. Don't worry about how it looks, or, oh, like I know you have the list of things you want to improve on. I get you. I'm with you on that. But just celebrating that you did the damn thing makes a massive positive impact in you continuing to build it into a habit. Because again, celebrating the effort, what it does is then it builds a new doorway of possibilities for your life as you continue to build upon these habits. And you're able to then move towards who it is you want to become and that vision you have for your life. And those possibilities that open up are some that you may not even imagined were possible for you. So I'm excited for you to go on this journey. You got this. If you like this episode, please don't forget to rate this podcast to help get this message out of Make Burnout Extinct. And you can share what resonates with you from this episode by connecting with me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. I don't take that for granted, and I'm excited to reconnect again soon.